Hi students of Business and Professional Writing. This is the lecture for Unit 5. I'm going to try to talk as loudly as possible because my air conditioner is on because of the heat, and it's very loud. So hopefully my voice is loud enough for you to hear me. In this lecture, I'm going to go over the formatting for a formal report, and that is because for the rest of the class, that is what you're going to be working on, the formal report. So please make sure that you format your report as it is discussed in the textbook or as I am guiding you to do in this lecture, because as posted in last night's announcement, the weekly reading is required. It's not optional, and you're also required to apply what you learn in the reading to the written assignments. And many of you haven't been doing that, and I have not been penalizing you, which is wrong on my part. I should have been, but I'm not going to look the other way anymore. So you must use the correct techniques and formatting for all of the written assignments for the rest of the class. So that means you must either watch this lecture or do the assigned reading. So the assigned reading for this unit is primarily chapter 18. I say that because chapter 20 consists of sample reports. So a formal business report is important because it is very likely that at some point in your professional career, you'll be asked to write a formal business report. So business reports, examples of business reports can be business proposals, annual reports, or in-depth problem-solving studies that answer questions plaguing your company or organization. Let's see. So most formal reports have one of two basic goals. They either aim to inform or to analyze. An informative report, examples of an informative report could be an annual report, which presents an organization's financial situation for the year, or it could be a progress report, which discusses how well a task is going. Typically, an informative report does not make recommendations, it just presents facts. Now, an analytical report looks into a topic, it makes recommendations based on analysis, and it is intended to be persuasive in nature. Formal reports are often documents they're external documents, which if you read and watched the lecture from last week, you know that means that it goes outside your company or organization. Again, a formal report is most often an external document, meaning that it is not intended to stay within the company or organization. It's intended for someone outside of your company or organization. So here are some differences, some characteristics that differentiate a formal report from an informal report. Now, starting with the name, a formal report is more formal than an informal report. The writing it uses is much closer to academic writing. The language and ideas may be more complex than they would be in an informal report. The sentences can be longer and they can contain more than one idea. The paragraphs in a formal report can be longer than they would be in an informal report. And there are no contractions. A contraction would be don't. So instead of writing don't in a formal report, you would write do not. There are no abbreviations allowed in a formal report. Cannot think of an abbreviation off the top of my head right now, but I'm sure at some point while you're writing one, you may come across one, and I'll just remind you, no abbreviations. You also cannot use I or you in a formal report. It should be written in the third person because that is objective in tone. You may use technical language in a formal report, and you should remember that plain English is still acceptable. Don't think that just because you can be more formal and because the tone overall is more comparable to academic language, that means you must turn your back on plain English. You don't have to do that. Remember that plain English is most often the most helpful type of language you can use. So the design of a formal report. Formal reports can follow many different designs. It's usually going to depend on your choices based on your audience. So what do I mean when I say there can be many different designs? The cover could be just a plain white, or it could contain many different colors and attractive pages full of graphics and illustrations. The deciding factor for you is going to be your audience, and what do you think would make this document most readable or most attractive for your audience? So a formal report is highly stylized. There are many rules of formatting which all should be followed. A formal report has 3 parts. It has the front or preliminary matter, it has the body, and it has back matter. So first we're going to go over the front matter. So the front matter section of the formal report, contains, it contains page numbers that are done in Roman numbers rather than Arabic numerals. So what is a Roman number? That would be like a 1, a 1, the kind of one that looks like an I, and then a 2 would be 2 of those ones. Sorry, I'm not explaining this better to you, but Roman numerals, so a Roman numeral 3 is like 3 I's. Hold on a second, I'll drink. This is Roman numeral 3. Okay, so you see it there, that's Roman numeral 3. In Arabic, numeral 3 is what we use. See this 3? Okay, so the front matter section of your formal report, it should be numbered using Roman numerals, and they should be small. Now the very first page of your formal report in the front matter section, sorry, I have to go back to I just lost my page, is, hang on one second, sorry, one second. Sorry, I lost the page, sorry. What the heck? Okay, so the very first page of the front matter is the title page, but you're not going to print the number. So the very first page of the front matter is the title page, and this does count as Roman numeral 1, however you don't print it, okay? After the title page comes what is called a letter or memo of authorization, and this would be the actual letter that is authorizing or commissioning the report. So it would be written by the person or people who have asked for this report or study to be done. There are examples of it in the textbook, and I will go over it in greater detail shortly, but that's the second item in the front matter. Following the letter or memo of authorization is the letter or memo of transmittal, and this presents the report to the person who commissioned it. Next comes the table of contents. Next comes the table of figures. Next comes the list of tables. And then last in the front matter is the executive summary or abstract. You can refer to it by either name. Again, as I always say, be consistent. Now, I'm going to go over each of these sections in greater detail. So here we go. The title page, again, these are all the different sections of the front matter. I'm just going over them in greater detail. The title page counts as page 1, but the page number is not printed. And again, you're using Roman numerals there. The title page contains the title of the report, who it was written for, except the language you would use is prepared for, or submitted to. Those are the two ways you would present that. And then it also contains who the report was written by, except, again, it's not going to say written by, it will say prepared by or submitted by, and then you will follow that with your name. And then the title page also features the date when the report is submitted, because you want to make it clear that the report is being submitted either on the date it was promised or before the date that it was promised. So it is important that the title of the report has all important words capitalized, okay? The title should have all important words capitalized. And by important words, I mean you don't have to capitalize words like the or articles, but all words should be capitalized. And then the title should also be in like larger font. The textbook says at least an 18-point font. And then, and you can also use it in boldface if you would like. All of the other elements should be in 14 to 16-point font. And then, lastly, the title page may have the full address of the recipient, that is the person the report is being prepared for, and then it can also contain the full address of the person who is preparing the report, but it doesn't have to. I would say 90% of the reports that I receive from students in this class do not contain the addresses, so I probably wouldn't put my address down either. It just seems unnecessary and a little bit too much, but it's up to you. Okay, so next we are moving on to the letter or memo of authorization. So again, this is if the report was commissioned, but in most cases these reports are commissioned, and so this would be the actual letter that was written to commission the report or to ask that this report be undertaken, and it is page 2 of the front matter section. The number may appear on the page. It doesn't have to. It's depending on the report style. Actually, I'm sorry, but we're doing a formal report, so for us it does have to. So it's going to be number 2. It should be in block letter format. The opening, and it should consist of an opening paragraph with background as to the reasons why the report has been commissioned, and this is followed by a description of the commission itself and the date when the report should be finished. So that would be the second paragraph. And then the third paragraph, if you can call it that, would be a polite closing with the person who has commissioned the report, that person's contact information. And there is even more detail on writing a letter or memo of authorization in the textbook. Now, the next item is the letter of transmittal. This is normally page 3, and again, remember, we're using Roman numerals in this section. And this too has 3 paragraphs with 1 point per paragraph. It explains what the report is about and announces that the report is ready either on the date it was promised or before the date it was promised. It summarizes very specifically and concretely the report's recommendations. That would be in the second paragraph. And in the third paragraph, it thanks the people who commissioned the report, and it may, or you may add another line offering further information if you would like. A formal report always has a letter of transmittal because the report must be written for someone. And overall, the tone is formal, respectful, and helpful, or it seems as if the person writing it wants to be helpful. So moving on, next we have the table of contents. So there's pretty much always a table of contents unless the report is very, very short, and by very, very short, the book says 4 or 5 pages. So there's pretty much always a table of contents, and the table of contents follows the letter of transmittal. The page number is in the footer of the page, and it is centered, and it is in Roman numerals. Let's see. Now the table of contents also it should take up an entire page. So let's say your table of contents, it only fills about half a page. Do not start the next section, which is the list of figures. Do not start it on the table of contents. The table of contents should have its own page, even if half of the page is blank, okay? Let's see. Okay, so as far as the listings in your table of contents, you can double space them or single space them. That is a matter of preference, and it is up to you. Next comes the list of figures, or you can call it the list of tables. So if your report has any graphs or tables or charts, you're going to list them by title. Now, if they don't have titles, you're going to give each one a common sense title, and you will list each graph or chart or table with its common sense title, and then also the page where it appears in the report. Now, the list of figures should also have its own page, meaning that even if your list of figures only takes up a quarter of a page, you are not going to start the abstract on the same page. You're going to give the list of figures its own complete page. And now moving on to the last section, and in my opinion, I've always found it to be the most interesting and important in the front matter. This is the executive summary. So an executive summary can also be called an abstract, and you may be familiar with the term abstract because when you are doing research in JSTOR or Academic Search Premier or any of those databases that we have access to through Kane's library, I would say 95% of those articles that we read and research and access, they have abstracts. So an abstract it's a fancy term for a summary, but I like the abstract because it does more than what a summary typically does, and there are some more, I guess, rules that you're supposed to follow when writing an abstract. So an abstract is supposed to be 1/10 the length of the full report. So I'm horrible at math, by the way, so forgive me if I mess this up. But if your report is 20 pages, the abstract should be 2. I think, again, if my math was wrong, please don't make fun of me or laugh. I'm horrible at math. But again, the report is a 10th the length of the full, the abstract is a 10th the length of the full report. Something else about the abstract, I told you that it should provide a summary of the report, of the body of the report, that is. The body is the part that contains the most important information, as well as the conclusion and recommendations. So it should provide a summary of the body of the report, but you want to provide the most detailed and precise summary possible with the amount of space that you have. So let's say you're allowed 2 pages. You really want to try to fill up those 2 pages and create the most thorough summary that you can create. And let's see what else. You're going to use Roman numerals to provide the number at the bottom of the executive summary or abstract. The structure would follow that of the body of the report, and you can actually, if you would like to lift and even repeat major headings that appear in the body of the report, you can do that. You're also allowed to repeat language from the body of the report. So does that sound like, I didn't want to say to copy language from the body of the report, but that's what I'm saying. So let's say there is a paragraph in your conclusions or recommendations that is really important. You can actually just lift that whole paragraph and bam, copy and paste it right into your executive summary. You don't have to rewrite it or change some of the words. You can just you can just lift that exact paragraph. That is okay. Let's see what else. Oh, and then lastly, the executive summary slash abstract should also contain just a little bit of background on the topic. And what I mean by that is, if let's say you're reading over the executive summary before submitting the report, just to make sure that it's good, you're proofreading it, and you realize that there's no indication of the background as to this report, you would then write one, because it's important that there is some background and some background information for your reader. And that is the executive summary, or abstract as I prefer to call it. And now we are moving on to the second section of the report, which is the body. So the body contains, first, the introduction, second, the analysis and data, third, the methodology, and then sorry, hang on a second, and then the analysis of data, then conclusions, and then recommendations. So I'll repeat that more quickly for you. The body of the report contains an introduction, and the second part is mode of analysis or methodology. The third is analysis of data. Fourth is conclusions. Fifth is recommendations. Okay, so the introduction contains all of the context that the reader needs to understand the data and what follows in the report. So what you could do is stop before writing this and consider the information, the data that you present, the facts, the figures, the conclusions that you arrive at, and ask yourself if there is any background information or anything that the reader needs to know to appreciate all of your conclusions and your data and your analysis. If there is anything you feel that is not here that the reader needs to know to fully appreciate the report more, you would add it as background information in the introduction. Let's see what else. So you're also going to discuss how and why the report was commissioned, and that can be simple and to the point, but again, how, why the report was commissioned. And then this is going to be a new paragraph, why you were chosen to write the report. Do you have some type of special expertise or skill? Is there some specific reason or something that makes you uniquely qualified to write this or to research it? And then the next paragraph is going to discuss the scope of the problem. And what does that mean, or the issue? Who is affected? So for this assignment, you guys are choosing a website, and you're going to be analyzing the website of your choice based on 2 or 3 other websites. So gosh, I can't think of a website off the top of my head that I'm really familiar with, but let's say you're doing a website for a small bookstore, okay? As I saw the first discussion question that was posted. The scope of this problem, I'm going to guess in this scenario, is not going to be huge. And the scope, that kind of means who is affected. So let's say that the bookstore, this little bookstore, has been there for ages. It's been there for a really long time. It's my age. Before there were ebooks, and back from a time when everyone read, you had to read an actual physical book, okay? So maybe websites are sort of new for this bookstore, and whatever the reason, their website it's all right. It gets the job done. It lets you know that they're there, and it provides you with information about the books they have and their hours of operation and their physical location and all that sort of thing. But after going and looking at the websites of Barnes and Noble and Barnes and Noble, I feel like there's another great bookstore that I can't come up with right now, but let's say you look up Barnes and Noble, and what I personally like to do is, I love bookstores, I love looking for bookstores in towns of great universities. For example, um, I had to go to Harvard once, and I found this bookstore. It's near the university. It's not part of the university, but it's called the Harvard Bookstore. And so every now and then I'll go to the website of the Harvard Bookstore's website just to see, what books do they have right now? What books are their staff recommending? And the reason I do that is because I feel like this is a great, like really reputable bookstore, and their staff are very well read, and they really know what they're talking about, and they can make a good book recommendation because these are Harvard students. So if I were doing this assignment with the small book, the bookstore that needs to revamp its website, I would definitely compare it to the Harvard Bookstore's website. Again, this bookstore has no affiliation with Harvard University. It's just located near Harvard University. But again, because I guess the idea, to me, it seems sensible to conclude that the students that work there are Harvard students. Thus, they're some of the best students in the world. And on top of that, they really enjoy reading. So they are the best to make recommendations. So if you're looking for a great thriller or a documentary, I guess a good I can't think of the term right now. Let's say you're looking for a murder mystery or a true crime or a great autobiography. It seems like these would be the best people to provide you with a recommendation. And sorry if I'm going a little off track, but my point was that this is a bookstore that has an amazing website. So, gosh, it still feels like I went off track. Sorry, let me read this in. So I was trying to talk to you about the scope of the problem. So in the case of the little mom and pop bookstore that's been there forever, the scope of the problem, the scope isn't probably, there probably aren't a ton of people affected by their lackluster website right now. It's probably going to be any repeat customers, and then of course the business owners themselves and their families, and maybe their immediate friends. Maybe there are more people that are affected. Of course, those who are employed at this bookstore are also, the employees of the bookstore are also going to be impacted by the website. So it seems like the scope, the more you think about it, it grows in scope. But you want to address that in a different paragraph. What is the scope of this problem? And then moving on in the introduction, the last paragraph is what are the possible consequences of this project. So let's say you're able to make do some analysis and make some recommendations to help this bookstore really create a new website that just does amazing things, and it increases their customer base, and it gets them all new kinds of customers and clients, and maybe even start some new projects and programs. Why is this significant? Why does it matter? Okay, so that does it for the introduction. Our next section is either the mode of analysis or methodology. And this is pretty straightforward. You're simply going to describe your research method. So in every case here, you're all going to be looking at websites and analyzing them just based on your own visual perceptions and your thoughts. But if there are any other steps that you take, you would describe them here in the methodology section. And don't skip over things. Don't dismiss things that you may do as not research. Like the way I was just describing to you the Harvard bookstore, and I was explaining how I think it could be a great source for the student doing the revamping of this one bookstore's website. So I guess what I'm saying is that could be part of the research that student describes. So don't belittle or minimize, don't minimize the work you're doing and the research you're doing. Discuss it for the significance that it has. Okay, and if you do conduct any surveys, you would also include that. If you do any research in any of the academic databases like Academic Search Premier or any of those databases that you can access through Kane's library, you could include that. I'm not able to think of any other types of research methods right now, but if you come up with any others, please include them. And then moving on, oh, and by the way, all these sections, moving on to the analysis of data, I would give all of these sections their own separate pages, meaning, I'll tell you what I mean. If, let's say, the analysis of methodology, let's say your analysis of methodology only goes down 2/3 of a page, or if mine only went down 2/3 of a page, I would not start the analysis of data on that same page. I would start it on the next page. You don't have to do that. There is no rule saying that you either have to give each section its own clean page or that you must kind of combine them to save space. There's no rule as to how you do that. Remember, what you want to do is prioritize readability. So those are any things that you can, steps you may take to make this easier for your reader to read and more visually appealing. So I think that not cramming everything together makes it more visually appealing and more readable. So I would just, even if your analysis of data doesn't take up a whole page, don't cram in the next section. Just turn the page and then start the next section. So again, we have the analysis of modes of analysis or methodology, and then the next section, is the analysis of data. In the analysis of data, you present the results of your research. So this would be the findings of your research. This is where you would also include any tables, any graphs, any charts, any pictures. This should be the longest section of your report, and it should be divided into several subsections. So again, I repeat, the mode of analysis or methodology, that is where you describe the research methods, but the analysis of data, that's where you're going to include the actual analysis or the actual findings of your research. So it's the analysis of data section that is actually longer and more important, okay? The next section is conclusions. So the conclusion section should be about a page, okay? It should be at least about a page. You're shooting for a page, 1 page in length. The textbook actually says it should be a page long or more. I'm just gonna say try to get it to a page. It should offer detailed discussion of what you have concluded from the research you've done. Again, a detailed discussion of your conclusions from the research you've done. It should begin with a brief description of the background of this issue or problem, and you want to do that because it provides a context that will help the conclusions feel that much more rewarding, okay? It should also include your recommendations. Now, the next section is called recommendations, but it's very different from the conclusion section, and I'll explain how. So, the recommendation section is the same as conclusions. It's just, this is how the textbook describes it, quote, a short, snappy version of your conclusions, usually in a bulleted list. So, recommendations contains the same information as your conclusion section, but it's a short, snappy version of it, and it's in list form, okay? So it's just a short, snappy version of the conclusions section, and it has a different name, recommendations. And, oh, I forgot, it's usually introduced by a single sentence. So before your list of recommendations, you're gonna have one sentence to introduce them. And this is moving on now to the back matter, which is the third section of the report. Wow, 34 minutes. Okay, don't worry, we're almost done. So the back matter tends to have this supplementary information. So this starts with appendices. Now, appendices, you may not have any appendices. Appendices are, how can I say this? Any information, any documentation that you didn't put elsewhere in the report because it felt maybe like too much, a little too detailed, a little too, it just didn't quite feel appropriate. So for example, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, my computer is about to die. I just have to run and get the charger. I'm coming right back. The lecture will be done in about 2 minutes. Please don't leave. Hang on 1 second. Okay, I can't find the charger, so I'm just gonna try to wrap this up before my computer dies. Okay, so again, appendices, this is where you put material that didn't quite feel appropriate earlier in the report. So let's say that one of your research methods was a survey. Let's say you created a survey, and you have included the results of the survey in the report, but you still have the questions that were in the survey, the questions that constituted the survey, so that actual survey itself, that could go into the appendices section, okay? So that's an example of the type of thing that will go into appendices. Let me see if I can, so it's another way of explaining it or describing it is supporting information that's too detailed to put into the body of the report. It could be raw data. It could be a table that is very detailed. And then each appendix, no matter how short, has its own page with a common sense title. So I say common sense title because most likely these appendices are not going to have their own titles already. So you just give each one a title that makes sense. And then the next section is the documentation of sources, or the works cited page. So we are doing this in APA format, and you actually have a works cited page is going to be due before the report is due. My main concern now is just bringing this to a close before it dies. I know this was long, 37 minutes. I hoped it wasn't too boring, but I hope that it provides you with the information you need on formatting this report so that you can get it done and get an A and do a great job. Hope this was helpful, and I look forward to reading your discussion question remarks so I can see what you've chosen to do your report on. Have a great day.